A week ago, I presented my video on the possibility that the third secret of Fatima may have been revealed in piecemeal by various popes of the 20th century. And in that video, I mentioned the part of the Fatima message that is almost universally ignored by the faithful. The request of Our Lady that the laity keep the 5 first Saturdays devotion. I asked in that video if people wanted a video on that subject, even though I've covered it before, and the answer was yes. So today I'll present the 5 first Saturdays devotion, where it comes from and why you should be keeping it, although it's pretty self-explanatory once we go into it. The timing for this is pretty good, too, as this Saturday is a first Saturday, and if you've never kept this devotion before, there is no time like the present to start keeping it. So let's get started, and as always, a special thank you to the patrons of this channel who make videos like this possible. So a little background. During the third Fatima apparition on July 13th, 1917, Our Lady revealed to Sister Lucia and the Fatima children that she would come to ask for the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart, and for the communion of reparation of the 5 first Saturdays. Later, Our Lady did just that. She appeared to Sister Lucia, and asked for the devotion in 1925. And again, she appeared later, and asked for the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart in 1929. Both messages have been pretty much ignored, but I'll probably go over the whole Russia consecration mess in another video. While staying at the house of the Dorothean sisters in Pontevedra, Portugal, Sister Lucia received a vision on December 10th, 1925, where the Blessed Mother appeared alongside a boy who stood over a luminous cloud. Our Lady rested one hand on the boy's shoulder, while she held in the other hand a heart pierced with thorns surrounding it. Sister Lucia heard the boy say, "Have pity on the heart of your most holy mother, which is covered with thorns with which ingrateful men pierce it at every moment, with no one to make an act of reparation to pull them out." Our Lady expressed her request in the following words: "See, my daughter, my heart surrounded with thorns, with which ingrates pierce me at every moment with blasphemies and ingratitude. You at least make sure to console me, and announce that all those who for 5 months on the first Saturdays go to confession, receive communion, say 5 decades of the Rosary, and keep me company for 15 minutes meditating on the mysteries of the Rosary with the purpose of making reparation to me, I promise to assist them in the hour of death with all the graces necessary for the salvation of their souls." A few days afterwards, Sister Lucia detailed this vision in a letter addressed to Monsignor Manuel Pereira Lopez, her confessor, when she resided in the asylum of Vilar in the city of Oporto, Portugal. So, why 5 first Saturdays? Why not 6 or 12? Our Blessed Lord appeared to Sister Lucia and explained this to her in a famous appearance to her on May 29th to the 30th, 1930. Again, there is a lot more to the Fatima message than merely what happened in Portugal in 1917. When he appeared to her, he said the following: "Daughter, the motive is simple. There are 5 kinds of offenses and blasphemies against the Immaculate Heart of Mary. First, blasphemy spoken against the Immaculate Conception. Second, against her virginity. Third, against the divine maternity, refusing at the same time to receive her as the mother of mankind. Fourth, those who seek publicly to implant in the hearts of children indifference, disrespect, and even hate for this Immaculate Mother. And fifth, those who revile her directly in her sacred images. Here, daughter, is the motive that led the Immaculate Heart of Mary to petition me to ask for this small act of reparation, and out of regard for her, to move my mercy to pardon those souls who have had the misfortune to offend her. As you see, seek endlessly with your prayers and sacrifices to move me to mercy in regard to these poor souls." Okay, so I want you to process that for a bit. Those who reject her Immaculate Conception, her perpetual virginity, those who say it is blasphemous to say she is the mother of all mankind, those who warp the minds of children against her by teaching false doctrines and rejecting the Church's teaching about her, or those Catholics who fail to teach their children properly about Our Lady's love for them, and finally, those who attack her sacred images. What does that sound like? Protestantism, most obviously, But I want to suggest also that this sounds a lot like the modernists as well. The maniacs who run the church now often do their best to downplay Our Lady's important role in the church. But any way you cut it, these blasphemies against Our Lady are tied directly to the message of Fatima. Directly, as in there's no getting away from the message of Fatima with these very common blasphemies against Our Lady. Okay, so how do you do it? It's a pretty simple devotion to keep, to be honest. The biggest part that is a stumbling block for most people is finding a First Saturday's Mass. I know that some people say that you can go to any Saturday Vigil Mass, and I guess that works, but in my experience, going to a First Saturday Mass is the best option. By that, I don't mean a Mass that is merely held on a first Saturday of the month, but one that is explicitly a First Saturday Mass. The Fraternal Society of St. Peter, or the FSSP, often do this, as do the SSPX, and when either of those organizations and others like them do it, they typically use the Mass for Our Lady in the month of August as their liturgy. Most of the explicitly traditional Latin Mass societies actually do this. This last fall, I wrote an article for a small family-run Catholic newspaper called Oremus, where I detailed the difficulty in finding such a liturgy from diocesan parish, which in my state means Novus Ordo parishes almost exclusively. In the research for that article, I discovered that virtually none of the Novus Ordo parishes in my entire state offered a First Saturday liturgy of reparation for blasphemies against the Immaculate Heart of Mary. But virtually all of the traditional Latin Mass parishes run by the groups I mentioned above did. It was bizarre. But then again, I'm not really that surprised, as the Fatima message has been twisted and abused like none other since the Council. Since the message calls for specifically going to Mass and doing certain things, I'd suggest finding one of these Masses to attend. But in a pinch, I'd suggest that if you went to a Saturday Vigil, it would probably be okay. Though if you were going to go that route, see if you can find at least a Saturday daily Mass to go to, which in my experiences are typically offered early on Saturday mornings in the rare places that they can be found. In the days when I went to the Novus Ordo Mass, I wanted a Saturday daily Mass, and I had to actually travel pretty far to find one. But don't use the First Saturday Mass as some excuse to not go to the Mass on Sunday, please. Going to that vigil on Saturday night, yes, would fulfill your Sunday obligation, but that's not the point of the First Saturday devotion. So, on the first Saturday, do the following. 1. Go to confession. 2. Receive the Eucharist validly, meaning in a state of grace. Hence, go to confession. 3. Saying 5 decades of the Rosary. 4. Meditating for 15 minutes on the mysteries of the Rosary. That's it. It's pretty simple. As an aside, I find it fascinating that she mentioned 15 minutes of meditation, which implies rather strongly the 15 decades of the Rosary, as it existed prior to the new mysteries being invented in the decades after the Council. But that's another topic for another time. And remember, when going to confession and receiving the Eucharist and all these things, do it with the intention of making reparations against the crimes that I outlined above. So as you might expect, some people found this to be pretty difficult for many Catholics to pull off. The devotion was modified or at least made slightly easier by our Lord himself. The original request of Our Lady asks one to confess and receive communion on 5 First Saturdays, again to say 5 decades of the Rosary, and to meditate during 15 minutes on the mysteries of the Rosary. In subsequent private visions and apparitions, however, Sister Lucia presented to our Lord the difficulties that devotees encountered in fulfilling some conditions. With great love, our Lord deigned to relax the rules to make this devotion easier to observe. Confession may be done on other days other than the first Saturday, so long as one receives our Lord worthily and has the intention of making reparation to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. That reception must still be on the first Saturday. So you can go to confession within 7 days of the first Saturday if needed. Even if one forgets to make the intention, it may be done on the next confession, taking advantage of the first occasion to go to confession. Sister Lucia also clarified that it is not necessary to meditate on all mysteries of the Rosary on each first Saturday. You can meditate on one or several if you wish. With much latitude granted by our Lord himself, there is no reason for the faithful to hesitate or delay this pious practice being done in the spirit of reparation, which the Immaculate Heart of Mary urgently asks. And believe me, if it's not obvious now that reparation is needed, then you're not paying attention. Why is reparation needed? Have you seen the blasphemies against Our Lady? I've seen depictions of prostitutes dressed as Our Lady. I've seen Our Lady commercialized for personal gain by self-described traditionalists. I've seen jokes blaspheming Our Lady's perpetual virginity all the time on social media. And you probably have too. Crimes have been committed against Our Lady. And we may have done so ourselves in times past. So please consider keeping this devotion. The Fatima message has clearly not been fulfilled. As Catholics, we expect the hierarchy to lead. It's sort of part of being in a hierarchical church, right? I mean, the expectation that our superiors in the institutional church will do their jobs. The reason that they aren't taking Fatima seriously in the slightest is pretty simple. Neither are we, as the laity. Yeah, we get the priests and the bishops and yes, the Pope we deserve. Yes, we do ruminate on the Fatima message, theorizing about its meaning, about cover-ups of the third secret. We reflect on the vision of hell and the message that sins of impurity are the number one cause of the loss of souls. We do all those things. But so few of us keep or have kept the first Saturday's devotion. I know because in the past I have kept this devotion, and the parishes that offer these masses have very low attendance, even for them. In the traditionalist parishes, these masses are usually a low mass, meaning a quiet mass with no singing and often no homily, and very few people attend. And it's not exactly a huge commitment for most people either. My strong suspicion is that one reason things keep getting so bad in the church is that we've ignored the message of Fatima almost in its entirety, save for the sensational bits. Now, one question does keep coming up about this. Do I only go to Mass for this devotion for the first 5 Saturdays, and is that it? Yes, you can keep it only for the first 5 Saturdays, meaning if you started this devotion by going to the first Saturday Mass on February 1st, 2020, you'd finish with the first Saturday Mass on June 6th, 2020. But here's the thing. You can keep going to this Mass of reparation if you choose. There are many Catholics who do keep this devotion in this way, going to the first Saturday Mass every month after month. Another question that is often asked is if this needs to be started at the beginning of the liturgical or calendar year. The answer is no, you can start this devotion at almost any time. The key is the first Saturday of each month consecutively for 5 months. So find a Mass of reparation near you and keep this devotion. It is essential. People often ask what they can do to help right things in the church. This is a great way to do it. It's better and far more Catholic than ruminating on some really crazy things I'm hearing these days, including some people advocating for a military coup against Francis, which would mean that you want the revealed vision from the third secret to come to pass, which is kind of weird and messed up given that Our Lady said these things could be avoided if the faithful did the penance required. So please be proactive and keep this devotion. I'm pretty passionate about this devotion, and my wife and I have made the time to do this despite having to drive minimally an hour for this devotion on Saturdays. If we can do it, so can you. Thank you for listening. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.